Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
This pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset. This is our chance to accelerate our pre-pandemic efforts to reimagine economic systems that actually address global challenges like extreme poverty, inequality, and climate change.
Justin Trudeau has now openly admitted what was once considered by many to be a conspiracy theory. Governments are seeking to exploit the pandemic crisis to impose policies they previously could not achieve through democratic means. Trudeau stated the pandemic has been an opportunity to reset things and implement plans the government had been unable to force on us before the crisis. Of course, you weren't asked if you wanted a great reset. You weren't asked if you wanted everything reshaped.
We match Mr. Trudeau's emission reductions by 2030. It's a smart plan to reduce emissions, but it's vastly superior on securing and creating jobs, getting our economy back to work in all sectors and in all regions of the country.
Take a moment and imagine how much Canada could achieve if the government wasn't holding us back. We have the most abundant resources on Earth, a hardworking population, and an entrepreneurial spirit. We should be by far the richest nation on Earth. Unfortunately, we're being held back by a federal government that seeks to centralize power, crush opportunities with massive regulations, and impose taxes that push billions of dollars of investment out of our country, while taxpayers get fleeced.
Spencer Fernando is a writer, a campaign fellow with the National Citizens Coalition, and you can find him on Twitter at Spencer Fernando and spencerfernando.com. How are you doing today, Spencer? Thanks for joining me.
Not too bad. Yourself?
I'm doing well, thank you. Now, the first thing I wanted to get right into and talk to you about was, I think it's the only video you have on your YouTube channel. I know that you're a writer, so you probably don't have time to do these videos, but the lone video you have is a really good one, and it's about the Great Reset, and you're talking a bit about how it was considered a conspiracy theory, but we're watching it in real time, pretty much across the world. So let's go ahead and play that clip for anyone who hasn't seen it, and we'll talk about it.
Justin Trudeau has now openly admitted what was once considered by many to be a conspiracy theory. Governments are seeking to exploit the pandemic crisis to impose policies they previously could not achieve through democratic means. Trudeau stated the pandemic has been an opportunity to reset things and implement plans the government had been unable to force on us before the crisis. Of course, you weren't asked if you wanted a great reset. You weren't asked if you wanted everything reshaped.
I want to ask you, where do you think that this whole Great Reset thing comes from? Clearly governments are implementing it in different ways. Do you think there's a group of people directing this, or are this politicians mimicking each other to gain more power?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I think, they always go and they meet with each other every year at a lot of these conferences. So, Davos, for example, so that's not a big surprise. But I think the problem is that this kind of fits into the mindset that a lot of people in politics just naturally have, right? Like if you go into politics in the first place, unless you're really a libertarian type person, you're probably more someone who thinks, okay, I'm going to use the government to reshape society and make people act in the way that I think they should, as opposed to just protecting the right to make their own choices. So I think when a crisis hits, a lot of politicians, they kind of think the same way. They say, oh, wow, look, people are really scared right now, and I think we can probably force through some stuff that we wouldn't get away with otherwise. So I think you're right. It's a mix of people actually talking to each other and trying to make plans, but I think a lot of it is they just mimic each other and they say, they're all using the exact same terminology, right? They're all saying build back better. You see almost every leader of every country saying the exact same thing. We're all supposed to be independent countries with their own politics and our own decisions, right? But they're all saying the same thing and talking the same way. So yeah, I think it would have been called a conspiracy before, but it's pretty obvious now.
Is that why you think the goalposts keep shifting? Because as long as the people are willing to go along with it, then we can just, change our goal and change what we were moving towards, so long as, we keep gaining momentum and power. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, you look at what happened in Ontario, right? And again, I don't think it's really coordinated between all governments, but it's just the mindset they have. And again, supposedly a conservative government in Ontario, right? Not too much conservative going on there. But they pushed and pushed and pushed and got away with everything until people finally had a limit. It literally took them, Doug Ford basically saying, all the police are going to be able to be, show me your papers, police, demand to stop anyone walking at any time, driving at any time. And people finally said, this looks like it's going a little bit too far. But that's what it took for people to react. And if people hadn't have reacted, then Ford would have kept pushing, and other premiers and other leaders in other parts of the world would have looked and said, okay, well, they got away with that in Ontario. Let's try it out here. So they're definitely mimicking each other, and they're definitely trying to push us as far as they think we'll go.
I definitely agree, and we'll get more to that specific thing later, but I wanted to pivot to Erin O'Toole and the federal Conservatives. I want to play what I think is a hilarious video of Erin O'Toole talking about his climate plan. I think it's on CTV, and it's just ridiculous from the get-go. So let's play that, and I have some questions about that for you.
You've called this plan daring, yet it is comparable to the emissions reduction seen under the current federal system. So if it truly is daring, why not go further and try to reduce emissions even more than what we currently have?
It's daring because we're going further in protecting jobs, in growing the economy, in making sure we have a prosperous Canada after COVID-19. We match Mr. Trudeau's emission reductions by 2030. It's a smart plan to reduce emissions, but it's vastly superior on securing and creating jobs, getting our economy back to work in all sectors and in all regions of the country. That's what makes it daring. It actually grows the economy.
So forget about him looking left and right to his lines, which are on both sides of him. Whoever decided that that was the background, the climate moving in the mountains behind, should be fired from the get-go. But I want to ask you, Spencer, how do you think that they're protecting jobs by taxing businesses? What's the logic there?
Well, they're not, obviously, and he knows that. I mean, if you look at what he said about Trudeau's plan up until, a few days ago, he was saying, carbon taxes are job killers, right? So now it's shifted, of course. But yeah, to be honest, he really looks like a clown when he tries to pull that kind of stuff, because that's exactly what Rachel Notley said. That's exactly what Justin Trudeau said when they brought in carbon taxes. Oh, it's not a tax, it's a levy, and it's good for the economy, blah, blah, blah. So it's just kind of embarrassing for him. He's really backed himself into a corner at this point. I mean, all the reports show that he apparently didn't tell most of his caucus about any of this stuff. Mm-hmm. So a lot of them were caught off guard. And he just has to somehow try to justify a terrible plan. And the plan is in many ways worse than the Liberal plan. I mean, he talks about creating jobs, I guess maybe for the banking industry or whoever's going to be, managing that fund. What's even worse about it is there's not really a shred of conservative thinking in it. I mean, you could totally see the NDP coming up with basically the exact same plan, or the Greens really. We take your money from you and then we put it into a fund or an account, and you don't get to choose whatever you want to spend it on. No, you get to pick from what the government tells you. And that's supposedly a conservative plan. So, yeah, I don't know how he thinks he's going to sell this to people.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, he's doing this thing that almost is comparable to the Green New Deal. If he was to expand it into a manifesto like AOC does, it's basically that. And he says on one hand Trudeau sucks and he's saying that for years, but all of a sudden Trudeau's plan is good. He's saying this plan is good and we're just not making it worse after saying that they're so bad for all this for all of time, I want to say. Now he's trying to force industries to change. I don't see how that will create jobs at all. And I think there's a tweet from yours that actually points out, if we could put that up, Efron. Here it is. We can read this right. Studying the potential for introducing new taxes on frequent flyers and luxury cars. How, can you explain this new points reward system that they've got going?
Not really. I don't think they can explain it either. The best I can come up with is, they've tried to say it's kind of like a Interact system. It'll be managed by the people who manage Interact, and then it's going to be like a kind of Costco rewards. It's really, you're converting, tax dollars into points that the government then gives you, and then you can convert that back into tax dollars, but I guess that's only for products that they say are acceptable. So it's almost like a social credit type environmental green scheme. Again, the problem that it's so tough to explain is really the big issue they have, just beyond the lying, obviously, but just the plan itself is terrible. I've said this on, a lot of videos I've done recently where I'm talking to, interviews and talking to people. But if you're explaining in politics, you're losing, right? That's kind of the saying you hear all the time. And so, the Liberal plan, I don't like it, but it's very easy to explain. The Liberals say we tax you and then we give you the money back in a rebate. Right now, whether they actually give it all back, they don't really, but it's easier for them to say they do. So it's easy to explain. We tax you and we give it all back. The conservative plan is we tax you, we put it into a fund, it's managed by the banks or some consortium on Bay Street, and then here's the list of stuff that the state says you can spend it on. And the more you use, I guess, the more points you have, and then the more you can buy. But if you don't like anything on the list, then you're screwed because that's all you have to choose from, and it's not really your money because the government's taking it and telling. I mean, it's a terrible plan, and it's almost as if they felt like, okay, we have to do something, and it can't be the liberal plan, so let's come up with this much worse plan, and somehow sell it as something different. So. Yeah, I mean, they look like fools trying to sell it.
Maybe you can get a bike, I believe, is the thing going around. But yeah, it's ripe for corruption because now you've got a list of things that politicians can appoint to, where this is okay to buy, this is not okay to buy. Oh, I wonder if people are going to get their items put on the list for government point spending or whatever it's going to be called. Now, in a broader point. The Conservative Party of Canada, is there any hope left in there? Should Derek Sloan just leave? I mean, I ask myself this question when I see him with the CPC still in his Twitter bio there. Should we be trying to shift to somewhere else, or should we be trying to save anything that's left of the CPC, or are they just booting too many people out for that to be possible?
Well, I wrote an article about that recently, and people always ask, "Oh, what's the alternative?" Right? And that's all. In some ways, O'Toole is kind of holding people hostage, psychologically, of course. Where it's like, look, you hate Justin Trudeau, and you may think that me, Erin O'Toole, I'm terrible, but hey, I'm not as bad as Trudeau, so you better vote Conservative anyway. So I think what I said in the article was, certain MPs who I think have a future in conservatism and in Canada. Someone like Michelle Rempel-Garner, Pierre Poilievre, if you live in their riding or you support them, then I'd say keep doing that. You want to keep some strong conservative voices in the country. If you live in a liberal-dominated riding where the Liberals win easily every time, certainly feel free to vote for, the PPC or the Maverick Party. Even just once to send a message to the Conservatives that you can't betray your base and you can't lie and get away with it. And then if you live in a swing riding, realize that you have leverage, right? The Conservative candidate or MP in a very close riding, they need your vote and they need your support and they probably want you to volunteer for them. And so, contact them respectfully, of course, and just say, look, you guys have been betraying us. You haven't spoken out against O'Toole, obviously lying to everybody and trying to pull a fast one on everybody. So unless I see you pushing back on some of this stuff, I'm not going to vote for you and I'm not going to volunteer for you. So it's not really a binary thing where people just have to say, I'm just automatically going to vote somewhere else or stay home. But realize that you have some leverage and you can use that and put some pressure on politicians. A lot of them may be, pretty cowardly, but at the end of the day, it's all about self-interest, right? They want to get reelected. So right now they're thinking if I oppose O'Toole, then it'll weaken the party and we'll lose. And the calculus in their mind needs to shift to saying, if you don't push back on what O'Toole's doing, you personally are going to lose because your core supporters aren't going to turn out for you. So I think people need to, study your riding, look at the vote margin, look at what your MP or Conservative candidate is saying, and use your leverage.
Yeah, and I think you made great points there about it not being a binary choice. A lot of people were mad in the last election at Bernier for trying to split the vote. Now, obviously, that didn't even actually happen. But I'm sure there's going to be a lot less complaining about people not voting for Erin O'Toole this time around, because it's pretty evident to me that he is not, like Doug Ford, not doing what he was elected on. Yes, it was an election within the party, but they are not doing what everybody thought they were going to do. In fact, they're probably doing the exact opposite. And to your point, there are a couple of them that I think you can throw your hat into sometimes, maybe not all the time. But when it comes to all the things that are happening right now, from lockdowns to police oversight to COVID hotels to online censorship, no one seems to be doing anything about that in the Conservative Party, especially not in the leadership office, whether they disagree with him or not. So I want to leave it there. And move behind the paywall for some extra spicy topics. We're going to talk about police oversight, the OPP, and how the police are reacting to all the new lockdown measures. So if you guys want to see the rest of that, and I know you do, go to rebelnewsplus.com. You can sign up for just $8 a month or $80 for a year and save 2 months that way. We'll see you guys there. Hey guys, thanks for watching another episode of Andrew Says. Be sure to go to rebelnewsplus.com and subscribe for the full episode. But here on Rumble, it's not going to be censored, and there's way more stuff we can talk about that we could never say on YouTube.